He was a famous trumpet man from out Chicago way. He had a boogie style that no one else could play. He was the top man at his craft. But then his number came up and he was gone with the draft. He's in the army now, a blowing reveille. He's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. He was a famous trumpet.
Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about World War II. And to really understand why World War II got to be so big, you have to understand who the leaders were in World War II. So today we're going to talk specifically about what we consider the bad guys, the totalitarian leaders that are taking over in the 30s that allow them to become such massive powers during World War II. So your U.S. standards that we're dealing with today, this is the Tennessee U.S. History Standards 56 and Tennessee U.S. History Standards 62. So you're going to need to analyze the reasons for and consequences of the rise of fascism and totalitarianism in Europe during the 1930s, including the actions of Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. So you should remember from previous sets of notes that fascism is a type of totalitarian government that requires complete control of its citizens. Okay, so you have to have complete control of their citizens. You got to have extreme militarism. Okay, which means everyone's a member of the military, and the military is the power. Okay, extreme militarism, extreme nationalism, which is the belief that your country is better than everybody else's, and because your country is better, you have the right to do whatever you want to other countries, including take them over. And you have to have complete devotion from your citizens, which means if your country tells you to do something that you would normally consider abhorrent, like kill a child, you do it anyway because you automatically believe that your country knows what's best. So those are the three tenets of fascism: extreme nationalism, extreme militarism, and complete devotion from its citizens. You have to have those three things. Other types of totalitarianism that's going to come in as communism. And we've talked about communism before, and we'll talk about it more actually in the Cold War. US 62 is identify the roles played in significant actions of the following individuals in World War II. So you need to know what Hitler, Mussolini, Tojo, and Stalin are doing. Okay. So at the end of this set of notes, you should be able to look at and answer these two questions. What kind of leaders were coming to power in Europe and Asia? And how did the United States respond to what was happening at the time? So we're going to deal with that first question first. Okay. What kind of leaders were coming to power in Europe and Asia? So we're going to look at the rise of the dictator in Europe and Asia. And all of these dictators we're going to talk about today, they all had kind of the same shtick, right? They all came to power in kind of the same way. They all described a glorious future for their people. Okay. Now you got to keep in mind, all of these countries were beaten down by World War I, right? They were broken by World War I. Now, of course, Germany was broken the most, but a lot of other countries were broken too. They were punished by World War I. They were humiliated because they lost, and they're going to try to raise the spirits of the people in their country by describing a way of taking back that pride in yourself, right? We're going to become so powerful that nobody else will be able to stop us. When that propaganda doesn't work and get people on their sides, they will use force. They will, arrest their enemies and throw them in jail. They'll have their enemies killed. They'll institute laws that makes people scared of talking back against them. They all do those things. Okay. And by the way, this little graphic, this is Tojo, Hitler, and Stalin. Okay. All right. So speaking of Stalin, okay, Stalin is the leader of the Communist Union or the Soviet Union. He's communist. Okay. He's the leader of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR. Most of us just call it the Soviet Union. He takes over after Lenin dies. So he actually takes over after, but sometime between World War I and World War II. He establishes a totalitarian government, right? Remember, Lenin was a purist when it came to communism. So Lenin actually did want the government to go away eventually, which is what communism is supposed to be. Communism is supposed to be everyone's completely equal, and you can't be completely equal if you have a president, right? Because the president automatically makes them better than you. So what's supposed to happen is communism as a government is supposed to get everything set up and working correctly, and then the government's supposed to go away and everyone's just supposed to keep doing the right thing. Um, Stalin doesn't do that. Stalin establishes a totalitarian government where he has complete control of its citizens, and he's going to use force to maintain complete power. He will kill anyone he doesn't know for sure he can trust. He's going to kill anyone who speaks out against his government. He's going to kill anyone that he thinks might try to rise up and take his position of power. Um, we don't usually talk about this a lot in U.S. history classes, but Stalin killed more of his own citizens than Hitler killed Jews. But we don't talk about that because during the war, for most of it, Stalin was on our side. So we preferred Stalin to Hitler, so we didn't treat Stalin like he was as bad as Hitler, at least not until the Cold War. Excuse me. Benito Mussolini, he is the inventor of fascism. Okay, Hitler did not invent fascism. Mussolini did. He is the leader of Italy. Fascism, remember, extreme nationalism, extreme militarism, complete control of its citizens. Extreme nationalism means your country is more important than anything else, including your family. He had black shirts, which is his version of the SS. Okay. He had a private army of extremists who were completely devoted to him. And he is going to, remember the extreme militarism? He's going to force children to join military organizations. So, as part of your schooling, you're given military training, and it teaches you that your country is more important than your life. Your country is more important than the lives of your friends and your family. So you're being raised this way. Adolf Hitler, he's the leader of Nazi Germany. And his dream, what he called, what his plan was to unite all German-speaking people. Okay, he said ethnic Germans were a superior race to everybody else, and his form of fascism is called Nazism. So it takes what Mussolini started and makes it even more extreme. And the bad guy, according to Hitler, are Jewish people. Okay, the Jews are the problem for all of Germany's woes, right? The reason that Germany signed the Treaty of Versailles and gave up all its power and bankrupted itself was because of the Jews, according to Hitler. Now, remember, we've talked about this a little bit before in class. Hating Jews, anti-Semitism, that's not something Hitler invented for Germany. That had been around all through Europe for hundreds and hundreds of years. And so what Hitler's going to do is he's going to take that prejudice that already exists, and he's going to capitalize on that. He's going to use that racism that's already there and use that as his stepping stone to power. That's what makes him a demagogue. A demagogue is someone who uses fear, hate, and prejudice to gain power. Hitler is absolutely a demagogue. We talked before about the Beer Hall Putsch, that it was Hitler's and the Nazis' first attempt to take over Germany. It happens right after World War I, and Hitler goes to jail because he tried to take over the government. While he's in jail, he writes this book. It's called Mein Kampf, stands for My Struggle. It's not a very good book. It's just not. It's not well written. It sounds like, when you read it, it sounds like a little kid ranting about why he doesn't get his way. It's really not. But the whole book explains why Germans were the master race, and because they're better than everybody else, that social Darwinism, because we're better, we should be able to take over the world and make everybody else do what we want. This becomes the Nazi Bible. Okay. A lot of white supremacist organizations today still consider this kind of their Bible. only they replaced German with white. So whites were to be the master race, not just Germans. It Hitler's going to use this book and the success of this book as kind of a stepping stone into becoming political. And he's going to get himself elected Chancellor of Germany. Now, it goes really quickly for him. He gets elected Chancellor of Germany, and he takes power of Germany in 1933, a couple months before FDR takes control of the United States. Within a year, they elect him, instead of just chancellor, just president, they elect him chancellor for life or president for life. And within a year of that, they have given him the title of Der Führer, which means my leader or the leader. And he's basically a dictator. He's an emperor. They're never going to get rid of him. He has complete power. He had the people of Germany so convinced he was the only thing that could save them that they gave up their rights to him and allowed him to become a dictator. Hideki Tojo. Okay. He is not the Emperor of Japan. Okay. The Emperor of Japan, I'll show you him later. Emperor of Japan is Hirohito. But Hirohito was kind of young and inexperienced. So he has a general who is running the military of Imperial Japan. And that's this guy, Hideki Tojo. He's the military leader. He's the one who's basically running everything in Imperial Japan because he is one of the closest advisors to Hirohito, to the emperor. So the emperor is going to almost always do what Tojo advises. And Tojo's big dream is creating an Asian empire where that would rival that of Europe, and Japan would be the head of this Asian empire. Now, the problem Japan is facing is Japan has been industrializing really, really fast, and Japan's a teeny tiny little island, and they're running out of natural materials. So they have to become imperialist. We talked about this before. They have to become imperialist in order to be able to take over or to get raw materials they need for their factories. So in World War I, Japan sided with the Allies, and they took all of Germany's colonies in the Pacific Ocean. Well, in World War II, the only other islands around them that they can take belong to us. So they're going to join Japan, Japan's going to join Germany so that they can take all of the Allied islands in the Pacific. Okay. So this is more of it's not just philosophical similarities that make them go together. It's actually kind of practical too, because it gives them a reason to attack our islands. So shows of aggression. This is kind of the writing on the wall in the 30s, where we could see bad things were coming. And at any one of these, if someone had stepped in to stop it, World War II might not have happened. So if you're looking at Germany, in 1933, Germany pulls out of the League of Nations. They say, you know what, you're not helping us at all. Screw you, we're out of here. Okay. By 1935, Hitler has officially directly violated the Treaty of Versailles and begun to build up Germany's military. If you remember, Germany's military was limited by the Treaty of Versailles. They were only allowed to have 10,000 troops in their army, which wasn't even big enough for Germany to have a national guard, much less an army. They could not have an air force at all. They were only allowed to have 12 boats in their navy. Of the 12 boats, only 6 of them could be weaponized, could be armed. They could have no submarines at all. And Hitler basically takes all those regulations and throws them out the window and begins building up another massive army. And we'll talk about Neville Chamberlain tomorrow and how Britain allowed this to happen. But nobody stepped in and stopped him because they were in the middle of the Great Depression and they're all worried about themselves. By 1938, Germany has officially annexed Austria. Germany has gone after Austria because Austria was taken away from Germany in the Versailles Treaty. Right after that, they take the Sudetenland. Now, the Sudetenland had originally been German land. The Sudetenland was given to Czechoslovakia because Czechoslovakia was a teeny tiny country that was made after World War One, and they wanted protection from Germany. And the Sudetenland was a strip of mountains that was given to Czechoslovakia to act as kind of a natural barrier. So Hitler's going to go and take the Sudetenland away. And all this time, Hitler's just telling the world, all we want is what was taken from us. So nobody steps in to stop Germany because Hitler's just saying, we don't want more than what we had. We just want to restore ourselves to what we had before World War I. Italy, Mussolini, his goal is he wants a new Roman Empire. Remember, Rome was in Italy. So 1935, Italy starts to begin preparing to invade Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia was the only independent country in Africa. It was the only country in Africa that was not a colony, not protected by somebody else. Okay. There were two more free countries, Liberia, and I can't remember what Britain named its free colony. But there were two free countries in Africa where freed slaves had been sent back all the way since the 1700s. But they had the protection of America and Britain. So Italy's not going to go to them. Italy's going to go to the one truly independent country, which was Ethiopia. 1936, Ethiopia fell. And then very quickly, Italy is going to just move west and control all of North Africa. Japan, 1931, Japan invades Manchuria, which is it's on Japan's western coast. It's the edge of China. Now what was so surprising about this invasion is Japan does it without any formal warning. You're going to see Japan do this over and over and over again. Japan does not announce it's at war with a country before it attacks. Japan counts on a great, big, huge surprise attack to wipe out the enemy before the war starts. Sound familiar? Pearl Harbor, anybody? Okay. In 1937, Japan's going to push further into central and northern China, and they're going to be in a full-out war before World War II even starts. All right, so how did the United States respond to what was going on? Well, all the way back since the 1920s, you should remember that the U.S. was isolationist. We were so disgusted with ourselves for getting involved in World War I and getting nothing done that we specifically set out to do nothing with the rest of Europe. We did not join the League of Nations. The Senate would not ratify that. We talked about the Washington Disarmament Conference, which is whenever we, as a country, voluntarily reduced the size of our Navy. Think about that. That's how sick we were of the rest of Europe. To get them to leave us alone, we made our military smaller to make ourselves less of a threat. The Kellogg-Briand Pact, we signed part of it, not all of it, but the part we signed outlawed war. We gave up our power to declare war. We were that disgusted. Okay. Now we could still say we could defend ourselves, but we weren't just going to go declare war and start war on somebody. And then as Europe gets closer and closer and closer to World War II, we do a series of different neutrality acts. You have the Neutrality Act of 1935, which says we'll be completely neutral and we're not going to do anything. 1937 allows us to sell to either side if they want to come pick up the goods. 1939, it's a neutrality act, but it's only a neutrality act on paper. Like it says we're staying neutral, but it's obviously pro-Britain, and we'll talk about that. Oh, one more thing. One more thing that shows we were isolationist. Remember, we paid Colombia that indemnity for the Panama Canal. They had been yelling at us and screaming at us for taking away the Panama Canal since Teddy Roosevelt did it. And we were finally like, here, take money, shut up. Okay, we finally just pay them to leave us alone. That's how done we were with other countries. So the U.S. response to all this totalitarianism that's going on in the rest of Europe is basically we pretend it's not our monkeys, not our zoo. Okay, it's not our business. Okay. most Americans wanted to remain neutral. They remember being dragged into World War I and that disillusionment they felt because nothing we wanted to get done in World War I happened. And the U.S. had problems of its own. The U.S. was in the middle of a Great Depression. We wanted to focus on us and kind of not focus on that. 1935 and 1936, there were laws passed specifically to prevent the U.S. involvement with any nation at war. So if a nation was at war, we could not deal with that nation. Okay. Dr. Seuss, yes, that Dr. Seuss was an interventionist. Okay. He absolutely wanted the U.S. to be involved in the war. So he's going to come out with a lot of really clever political cartoons aimed at getting the United States involved in the war. And here's one of them, right? Ho hum, no chance of contagion. So you've got a bed here full of Europe, right? And here's all of the different diseases it's dealing with, okay? It's got Stalin itch, Hitleritis, Blitzpox, Nazi fever, fascist fever, Italian mumps. And here's Uncle Sam in a bed of his own. You know, what a lucky thing we've got separate beds, right? There's no chance that Uncle Sam's going to get is going to catch any of these contagious diseases of this totalitarian regimes. None of these bad ideas are going to make it to America just because we're in separate beds, which we all know is not how sickness works, right? You're that close, you're probably going to catch it. But and that's the point. The point is, guys, we're tricking ourselves if we think we're going to not be involved in this war eventually. We might as well go ahead and do it now. All right, so the U.S. finally gets involved, but not militarily, technically, okay? In 1937, Roosevelt, who had always wanted to be involved anyway, finds a loophole, okay? Roosevelt is being constrained by the voters. The voters are isolationist. They do not want to be involved in this war, and they kind of have to be, so FDR has to be isolationist to keep getting reelected. So he finds a loophole in 1937. Japan never formally declared war against China, right? Japan attacked without warning. So Roosevelt is able to help China and help countries that are helping China, like Britain and France, because China technically is not at war. No one ever declared war on it. In 1937, FDR also starts trying to convince the American public not to be isolationist and to get involved in the war. He gives a famous speech we're going to look at later called the Quarantine Speech. And in this speech, he compares this totalitarianism that's going on in Europe to a disease. And he says, you know, if we allow ourselves to be isolationist, this disease of totalitarianism is going to spread, and it might make it all the way to us. So we have to find a way to quarantine, to block that off and keep it from spreading. Okay. And that is it.